District.
I'm Sarah Dewey. I teach at Santa Ma High School in Ascension Parish.
Grade level of students.
I teach 12th grade AP Literature and Composition.
What are you most passionate about as an educator?
As an English teacher, I am most passionate about exposing students to rigorous literature that's going to challenge their viewpoints and provide new perspectives for them. And the hope is that when they graduate and leave me and they enter the working world, that those new perspectives, those lessons that they're learning through literature will transfer over to help them become more productive members of our society.
What content and curriculum are you using?
I'm following College Board curriculum, and the skill that we're going to be covering today is speakers in poetry.
What are the lesson objectives?
Today, their goal is to not only be able to identify the speaker in a poem, but also be able to characterize that speaker and figure out that speaker's perspective. To start for this lesson, I began with the end in mind, so looked at their end writing tasks that students were going to be responsible for completing, and then figured out what skills do they most need help with to be able to successfully achieve that end goal. So prior to today's lesson, we had already started the process of prepping for this essay. We've read the first poem that they needed to read to be successful on this essay, and today we're going to wrap up that poem and move into our second poem to help them complete that writing.
Awesome. What adaptations have you made to support all learners?
So to prep for this and account for some student struggles, I had annotated models provided for students that they could use if they got stuck at any point in the lesson. I also gave them criteria aligned to our learning targets to help give them a way to guide their assignment and also as a way to self-assess when they were complete. Learning targets for today, we're focusing on skill category 4 for AP Lit, the enduring understanding, which is about the function of the narrator or the speaker. So first thing we have to be able to do when we're reading is identify our speaker or narrator. And then we have to be able to identify and describe details, diction, syntax, in a text that reveal the speaker's perspective. Those things tie directly into our skill category 1, which is explain the function of a character. So we're identifying our narrator, or speaker of our poem, but we're still characterizing them at the same time. So these two skills overlap. So still working towards that. Can someone tell me in this writing prompt where we're hitting our learning targets? Keyword. Okay, so we need to analyze. Okay, what does that mean to analyze something? We need to break it down and go deeper, and I'm glad y'all said that because that is going to be our main focus today. So we need to break down into parts. We need to make sure that we're going deeper surface level. A lot of you are losing some points on row B in your rubric, which is your analysis. So we are going to focus a lot on this today. Okay, what else hits our learning targets specifically? Thank you. Characterize. Okay, so this is connecting back to our goal and also speakers, right? So we're looking at those two things. You can already characterize your speaker. We've already identified our speaker. I know that you can do these things, and you showed me that yesterday. And you've showed me that before because we've dealt with characterization. The part that we're going to focus on with our analysis is looking at how the author uses literary devices and techniques to do these things. It's easy to say, here's my character trait, here's my evidence for it, here's going to be, here is the Hawk's perspective. The harder part is figuring out, well, how did my literary device or technique that I am selecting, how did that propel this information? Like, how did it create this information for me? Okay, so that is what we're going to focus on today with our characterization, making the connections between those two, because that's where your analysis comes from in your writing. Okay. So I'm hearing some good conversations. Y'all are actually saying some good stuff connecting with the analysis, but we have to figure out how do we transfer those thoughts that we have into some writing. Okay, so I'm giving you a model example for you on the front page that I just handed out. And I focus just on first person point of view, okay, for hawk roosting. Does someone want to go ahead and read the character trait with commentary for me? That is only focusing on the character trait in isolation. But what we also have to be able to do is to get to the perspective, okay? And that perspective gets us to, in the writing prompt, where it asks for the speaker's view of the world, okay? Because remember, perspective, someone remind me what that is when we talk about perspective. I'm asking you to identify what? Well, that's going to be point of view. So how is perspective different from point of view? Do you remember? Thank you. Yeah, the character's opinions and beliefs, okay? So we have to figure out, like, we know these character traits, but what does that tell us about what our character now believes about his place in the world, right? If you look at the top of this page, I do have some criteria there too to help guide you in doing this, to make sure that you're hitting all the checkpoints needed to be successful at this. So what I want you to do next is on the top of the back page, you're gonna see that there is a spot that says your turn. So for hawk roosting right now, in your groups, you can do this together, pick a different literary device or technique, and we just talked about a bunch of different ones that hopefully you wrote some of those down if they were ones that you didn't initially think or identify. But as your group, pick one to go ahead and do together. I want you to do this process together. If you need to, look at your criteria at the top of your page for guidance, and look at that model for how to effectively implement that if you need extra help. What's happening in this poem?
So, because he's a golden retriever, he retrieves, so he likes to play fetch instead of catch.
Okay.
I'm taking my thing back.
Yeah.
But like, he's also retrieving their person from the stress and anxieties they feel worrying about the future. It's like, hey, step out of that for a moment, enjoy it. Take
Good.
some of my energy. Let's play.
Good. I like it. Keep going. So now that you've hit on comprehension, go ahead and start digging deeper into character traits and hopefully identifying some techniques that are providing those character traits for us. Once you have those conversations about the comprehension, go ahead and start diving into that analysis of your learning targets. Start exploring the character traits that are there and identifying the techniques that are helping us to discover and define our characters, our speaker. What are some of the character traits that you guys have identified?
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I like that. But where?
Distracted,
For like,
worry-free.
yeah, carefree.
The owner stresses me.
Okay, so you're hitting on the owner, and seems very different from our speaker, right? So could that be a technique?
Could be a technique. To highlight the dog's carefreeness, you highlight the owner's stressfulness.
Okay, so do you know the lit device that specifically, I mean, you can just use contrasting information, but when you put two things side by side to highlight the differences, good, juxtaposition, yeah. So that's a technique that we have there.
I'm sorry.
And that juxtaposition is showing us what?
Yeah.
What's it showing us?
Different like dogs view the world and how humans.
Good, so you're going into the worldview, which is where we need to go. So what was a character trait that you had before we get into the worldview? Y'all just said that he was energetic, distracted. Okay, so how is that, so taking the carefree and developing that into the perspective, what can we assume about his opinions? Okay, I like that. Okay, give me your evidence to support that.
When he says, what is it? Or else you're off.
I don't think so.
I was gonna say, or else you're off and follow concerning tomorrow. Being like, you're worried, I'm not.
Yeah, the fact that he's pointing out that the owner is worried shows us that, yes, that he's not. Okay. Keep going. You'll need a couple more spots to be able to characterize, okay? So already, I'm glad that you said that. So you're talking about sentence structure. and how you got to that point of characterizing him. So that's what we need to hone in on our analysis. So explain to me, because you're getting into the meat of what we need to be doing today with that analysis. So explain to me how that sentence structure got you to that point.
It shows like, I don't know, that he's like spastic. Like he's very energetic and like.
But how would you describe it in sentence structure? Like what in the sentence structure made you think that?
I don't know how to use big words, but it's the
You don't have
fact
to use
that,
big words.
the sentence starts here, but then it ends in the next stanza.
Okay.
None of the sentences end in the same stanza. Like at least
Okay.
the stanza stops.
Okay, so it's not consistent. So that's one thing. Also look at the punctuation.
Oh, there's some dashes and commas and colons.
Which again, so that punctuation's all over the place, right? That punctuation's tied to syntax. Okay. Also look at just what's in between the pieces of punctuation. Look at the topics.
Oh, like oh joy, and then in these parentheses.
Well, that oh joy, that's important. So that's separated by the dashes. But it's in the middle of him already speaking. So if we're going to tag that to syntax, what are we going to say about that? Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately where we're getting at, right? That is leading to your character trait that y'all had just mentioned. So y'all see how we're looking at the technique to build our character trait. Y'all need to have a little bit more analysis to explain it, though. While a couple groups are finishing up, let me explain what you're doing next. There's sticky notes at every group. What y'all are going to do is just rotate together. I want you to be able to see some of the things that other groups were thinking in their analysis. See if they have similar character traits that you and your groups identified. See if they have similar perspective. See if they have similar worldviews. This is a way for you to gather more information that is going to be helpful for your writing. In addition to just gathering information, I want you to peer assess. See if you agree with what they have, if you think that it is appropriate, if you think that it is useful, aligned to our criteria in our writing prompt. You're going to leave feedback on the sticky. It could be glows or grows, something that you think is done really well or something that you think could be improved on. Okay, so we're debating a device or technique. Okay, we'll leave that for grow to maybe reevaluate that technique. So if you're saying that maybe it doesn't apply, can you provide like an alternate with where they were going if that doesn't fit entirely? So it doesn't have to be, so you're saying that rhetorical questions aren't there, but questions are still being used. Is there another way that you want to label it? Yeah, I mean, it could just be, it could just be punctuation through the use of question marks, right?
Hypophora.
Oh, we got the actual, say it again?
Hypophora.
And that's used, what's the definition? Give me.
A figure of speech in which the speaker poses a question and then answers the question.
All right, cool. So write that. So do we agree that that's being done in the poem first, though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just maybe need to update how we're labeling that technique. Okay, so that's a grow forum. Make sure you write grow in that sticky note. Remember, our goal was being able to build that analysis. You guys can already easily identify character traits, easily tell me the speaker's perspective. The hard part is, remember, making sure we can connect the devices we identify to explain how they are building that information for us. So you've already gathered some information, you've done it with your groups, you've gathered some info. So go ahead, and if you haven't completed that last section of the chart, I want you to do that one on your own. That is what you're going to turn into me. At the bottom of the page, now that we've gone through this process, I want you to reflect. You have a reflection question at the bottom asking about using the criteria and that guided model to help with your analysis. So after my lesson, it was obvious that majority of my students had met their objectives. I had a few still struggling with a few components, but they were able to verbalize that in their reflection for me, and they were able to reference their criteria to tell me exactly where they were messing up. So the next day I was able to pull those students aside to review the skills and pull a few more student models for them to help get them back on track. So after this lesson, students then took the analysis from the lesson and they turned it into a full-blown AP essay for me, and they were able to show mastery of the skills from that lesson on that essay. So in the future, I plan to implement this lesson similarly because it seemed to work very well for my students.